chance may crown me without my stir. That line from Macbeth has always fascinated me because for one brief moment, Macbeth considers doing nothing. He thinks that fate alone is enough, that destiny doesn't need the violence, and that the prophecy will unfold naturally. And honestly, if we look at the play carefully, the prophecy is already unfolding naturally. Macbeth becomes Thane of Cawdor. No action required from his side, no manipulation, no murder. It just happens. So the biggest question becomes, if the prophecy was already unfolding, why did Lady Macbeth feel that she has to force it? Why did she have to act? Why did she have to push Macbeth towards Duncan's murder instead of waiting? And that question changes everything, changes how we completely look at Macbeth. Because maybe the tragedy is not about fate controlling people, and maybe the tragedy is about human beings unable to trust fate completely. Today, I want to talk about fate versus free will in Macbeth, particularly through Lady Macbeth, because I feel in modern media she is completely misunderstood and misrepresented. She is reduced to this power hungry villain, but if we look deeper, her actions reveal something far more human: fear, ambition, urgency, and in many ways, Lady Macbeth becomes the embodiment of human condition to control the destiny. Before we even talk about Lady Macbeth, we need to understand the atmosphere that Shakespeare has created in Macbeth. The play opens with chaos, thunder, lightning, witches. Fear is foul and foul is fear. Immediately, Shakespeare establishes a world where certainty doesn't exist anymore. The witches are important because they directly never forces anyone to do anything. That's the key point. People always accuse that the witches has caused all the chaos and all the trouble. But technically, they only provided the information. They just planted the idea. And Shakespeare makes it deliberate in the play. Are the witches predicting the future actually? Or are they just influencing the psychology of the person? We never fully know. And the prophecy itself is very simple. Macbeth will become Thane of Cawdor, Macbeth will become the king, and Banquo's descendant will become the kings. The first part of the prophecy comes true almost instantly. This is crucial because Shakespeare intentionally proves the witch is credible. Macbeth himself is shocked. The Thane of Cawdor live. Why do you dress me in borrowed robes? But once Ross confirms it, imagines the second prophecy coming true as well. However, we should notice Macbeth's first instinct after hearing it. If chance will have me king, why chance may crown me? This line matters almost more than anything else in the play. Because Macbeth initially imagines a passive relationship with fate. He thinks that destiny will unfold naturally. And based on what has happened so far, he is not completely wrong to think that. The first title arrived on its own without any intervention. So why should he assume that the second one would not? And this is where Lady Macbeth enters and changes everything. Lady Macbeth, when she reads the letter, her reaction is almost immediate. She doesn't hesitate, she doesn't question the morality, and instead starts strategizing. But what is fascinating is why. Because she already knows that the prophecy is working. The first prediction has come true. So why not just wait for the second? And I think the answer lies in how Lady Macbeth and even us understand human nature. She fears Macbeth's character more than fate itself. Listen to what she says. Yet do I fear thy nature, it is too full, or the milk of human kindness. This line is revealing. Lady Macbeth doesn't think that Macbeth lacks ambition. She says, thou wouldst be great. Macbeth wants the power, but according to Lady Macbeth, he lacks the cruelty necessary to acquire that power. And that tells us something important. She believes in opportunities will disappear. That if they do not act right now, the moment is going to vanish. And this is very realistic on her part. Think how we look at ambition in real life. People really trust that if they do nothing, the success will arrive for them. Even when opportunities start presenting itself to us, fear of losing that opportunity pushes people towards control. Lady Macbeth embodies that fear. She sees that the prophecy is not just a promise, but an opportunity that requires action. The witches may suggest possibilities, but Lady Macbeth transforms these possibilities into a decision. The murder of Duncan is not just fate, it's a deliberate choice. This is the heart of the discussion. Why can Lady Macbeth not simply wait, especially when the prophecy already seems so reliable? And personally, I think there are several layers to this argument. Number one being the fear of uncertainty. The prophecy doesn't include a timeline. The witches may never say when Macbeth is going to become the king. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen decades later. Lady Macbeth wants control over time itself. And human beings are deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty. Waiting requires trust. And Lady Macbeth simply doesn't have the trust in universe for her to wait. Ironically, this destroys everything. Ambition mixed with insecurity could be the second reason why she acted the way she did. Lady Macbeth's ambition is intense, but ambition always hides insecurity. She fears that Macbeth is going to lose courage. She fears that the circumstances will change. She fears that Duncan is going to name the heir permanently. She is fears that this opportunity that has presented is going to slip. And in many ways, she acts purely out of panic because once she cannot imagine power, she cannot bear losing it through possibility. Third reason could be the desire for agency. This is another fascinating layer. She does not want fate simply to happen. She wants to shape it, to control it, and to claim ownership over it. And this reflects the broader human impulse. People often prefer dangerous control over helpless waiting. Doing something, even something terrible, can psychologically feel easier than the uncertainty. Lady Macbeth would rather commit the murder than remain powerless. This is tragic, but at the same time, this is also deeply human. One of the most infamous moments in the play is the Lady Macbeth's invocation. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here. This speech is often interpreted as Lady Macbeth rejecting femininity, and partially, yes, but it goes a little deeper than that. Lady Macbeth is attempting to remove her own humanity. She associates compassion, remorse, hesitation with weakness. And in order to act on the prophecy, she believes that she must destroy these emotions within herself. This is incredibly significant because Shakespeare shows that power that against morality requires psychological self-violence first. Lady Macbeth cannot naturally commit murder so peacefully. She transforms herself emotionally. She asks to be filled from the crown to the toe top full of direst cruelty. Notice the imagery. She wants cruelty to completely replace her empathy. But Shakespeare ultimately proves this impossible. Her humanity returns, her guilt returns, the sleepwalking returns. Her mind cannot permanently silence the conscience. And this becomes important because Lady Macbeth first appears stronger than Macbeth, but psychologically she collapses faster than him. One of the reasons why Lady Macbeth acts so aggressively is because Macbeth hesitates repeatedly, and his hesitation reveals that he understands the moral consequences far more than Lady Macbeth. Macbeth says, "We will proceed no further in this business." At this point, he wants to stop. And what is fascinating is Macbeth's reasons are rational. Duncan is a good king. Macbeth is hosting. Murder will create chaos, and even he acknowledges bloody instructions return to plague the inventor. He understands that the violence is not going to create anything other than deadly consequences that he will have to face. So why does he continue then? Because Lady Macbeth attacks his identity. She questions his masculinity, his courage, his inconsistency. When you just do it, then you were a man. Lady Macbeth psychologically manipulates Macbeth by connecting murder to manhood. This reveals another layer of fate of free will. Macbeth is not mind controlled, he chooses, but his choice is influenced by emotional pressure, ambition, and insecurity. Shakespeare presents free will as psychologically complicated. People will make the choices, but those choices will emerge from manipulation, desire, fear, and pride. Now, the play also raises an interesting question that whether Macbeth would still become the king without doing anything. Shakespeare never exclusively answers this, and he rather hints that the murder may have been necessary in the play. After all, the first prophecy came true naturally, and later the play the witch's prediction continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Briam Wood technically moves. Macbeth is not of women born in ordinary sense. The prophecies operates through paradoxes. So it is possible that Shakespeare wants us to wonder whether Macbeth would have been crowned king without this entire bloodshed. And if that is true, then the tragedy would become even darker because Macbeth and Lady Macbeth destroyed themselves trying to force something that they already had was destined for them. Their downfall then would have come not from fate itself, but from the impatience, the idea that feels incredibly modern. Sometimes people ruin their own lives attempting to control something that would unfold naturally for them. And Shakespeare captures this psychological desperation perfectly. Once Duncan is murdered, something shifts for both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Before the murder, Lady Macbeth appears controlled, and after murder, Macbeth becomes increasingly violent while Lady Macbeth slowly starts to disintegrate. This reversal is fascinating. Adapts himself to the violence, but Lady Macbeth cannot. Initially, she dismisses her guilt. A little water clears us of this state, but later, during the sleepwalking scene, out damn spot, out I say. The blood, once minimized, becomes psychologically permanent. This is one of Shakespeare's greatest insights. Physical actions end, but psychological consequences continue. And this reveals that despite her earlier performances of ruthlessness, she is far more emotionally detached from morality. The guilt destroys her internally. Meanwhile, Macbeth just becomes numb. At the end, he describes life as a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Notice how both the characters are spiritually destroyed. Their attempt to control fate ultimately empties their life of meaning. One of the smartest way to read Macbeth personally for is to not just see fate as control but as temptation. The witches tempt, they provoke, they awaken the hidden desire, but they never force the action. Banquo hears the prophecy too, yet he doesn't commit any murder. That contrast matters in the play. It proves that prophecy alone is not enough. The characters determine the response. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth possess ambition before the witches arrive. The prophecy simply gives them that their ambition the direction. In that sense, the witches expose human weakness than rather than create it. Lady Macbeth becomes central because she transforms temptation into action. She cannot tolerate the uncertainty. She cannot endure the waiting. She confuses possibility with entitlement. And that psychological impatience drives the tragedy. I genuinely think that Lady Macbeth is one of the most tragic characters ever written by Shakespeare. Not because she is innocent, she absolutely participates in the evil, but because her downfall emerges from profound human emotions: fear, ambition, desperation, the need for control, and perhaps more importantly, the inability to trust that life will unfold naturally. Sees destiny approaching and immediately believes that she must force it. That impulse destroys her. Shakespeare punishes not for ambition alone, but ambition disconnected from morality and patience. Lady Macbeth's tragedy is that she mistakes action for strength, but true strength may occur actually with the restraint, waiting, trusting, allowing fate to continue without violence. Ironically, Macbeth himself briefly understands this idea before abandoning it. Again, if chance will have me king, that line becomes heartbreaking in retrospect because Macbeth chooses another path. So, did the fate actually cause the tragedy in Macbeth to come to it all? Partially. The prophecy begins a psychological chain reaction, but Shakespeare ultimately places responsibility on human choice. Witches predict it, Lady Macbeth persuades, Macbeth acts, and that distinction matters. Because the play suggests fate may open doors, but human beings decide whether to walk through them. Lady Macbeth acted on the prophecy because she feared the waiting. She feared the uncertainty and she feared losing the opportunity. And she believed that power belonged to those willing to seize it violently. But Shakespeare also reveals the devastating cost of forcing destiny. The tragedy of Macbeth is not simply because fate that exists. It is human beings trying to overpower fate through control and in doing so destroying themselves. Vaulting emotion which overlaps itself and falls on the other. And maybe that is the real warning of Macbeth. Not that ambition is evil, but that when human beings become obsessed with controlling the future, they lose themselves long before they lose everything else. And that's it all for today, guys. Thank you for listening. And if you have anything to add to the conversation, please leave a comment down below.